Snipers, you have to see what's happening to the Bitcoin price this Saturday, as we have yet to see decisive price action above 61,844, which is the last roadblock left before Bitcoin could potentially retest its previous all-time high and re-enter price discovery to see new all-time highs. And because of this, we have taken a short position at 62,130. For those in the Discord, we have the best trade signals in this market. This has already hit all targets, and as a trader in this market, we want to take advantage of not just the upside volatility, but also the downside volatility. And there was a very specific reason we took this short that wasn't just based on technicals and fundamentals. Despite the likelihood of Bitcoin potentially breaking into new all-time highs, I still think that there is potential to play both sides of the equation. And I want you guys to realize that psychology is the most important aspect of a market. And we have to assume that at these higher price levels, there are going to be some sellers in the market. Regardless of whether or not we believe Bitcoin is going to hit 100,000 by the end of this year, there is still potential for us to see some downside action before breaking into these new all-time highs. And so we do have 58,353 and the weekly open at 54,800 as potential downside levels that Bitcoin could retrace to before seeing further upside. And of course, once we get to those levels, if we get to those levels, we're going to have to determine what the volume looks like, because we've yet to see real decisive volume. And remember, the path of least resistance is always going to be sideways to a little bit higher. So until we really see the volume, we can still play the long and short side. And so I want you guys to realize that this is the first time, if we were to actually factor time into this chart, that the individuals that have been able to purchase Bitcoin at the $10,000 level, if we were to take this timeline here to 360 days, which is 1 year, and that's important because when people are making a decision on whether or not to sell their Bitcoin, they are going to think about whether or not they want to trigger short-term capital gains or long-term capital gains, and realize this is the first time that those who have purchased Bitcoin at the $10,000 level back in October of 2020 have the opportunity to sell above the $60,000 level with triggering long-term capital gains, which is pretty much half of short-term capital gains. And so that's actually one of the big reasons we decided to take a short 62,000. And of course, that has already hit all targets. You want to be in and out of short positions because there's always more downside for short positions than long positions, because it's unlimited downside with short positions, while long positions only have 100% downside. And so realize that we have to really consider the bulls and the bears when looking at today's price action. And at this point, we can only assume that this right here is going to be the level that a lower high would form, because if we get above 61,844, Bitcoin pretty much is on track of going back into price discovery. And so if we were to just assume that this is the level that we're going to start to see some sellers in the market, then we start needing to look at some of the potential downside targets, and we'll certainly look at upside targets. But I want you guys to also realize the total market cap did form a higher high. And so that is a very big puzzle piece. Despite Bitcoin not being able to form a higher high, the total cryptocurrency market cap entering price discovery maybe is a less exciting thing to happen. So could we assume that the whales have psychologically allowed the total market cap to form a higher high while only allowing Bitcoin to form a lower high so far before starting to see a little bit of a cool off? Of course, October 18th, we have the ETF approval coming. A lot of people will typically buy the hype and sell the news. So all of these things are on the table. And so it's not that we're being bearish in any way, but we want to address the bulls and the bears on this channel. And so we'll also look at the revolving parts of the market, like Ethereum to Bitcoin being the leading indicator for altcoins, still showing weakness at this 200-day moving average and this market structural support that it's testing for a third time. You knock on a door multiple times, the likelihood that breaks becomes highly likely. Being below 65,000 Satoshis, 53,500 Satoshis is the next downside target. So we want to talk about what's happening with the revolving parts. This also influences the altcoins outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum actually being fully below the 200-day moving average right now. And so those are two charts that are going to really give us an idea of how altcoins are going to be acting regardless of whether or not Bitcoin is seeing upside or downside. And with Bitcoin dominance moving above this 200-day moving average, maintaining price action above the 200-day moving average. There are two reasons this could happen. Number one, Bitcoin enters into a new bull cycle and altcoins follow later, or we're seeing altcoins hedge into Bitcoin in expectation of some downside, with Bitcoin probably going to see less downside than the altcoins. So these are all revolving parts that are in the market right now. The DXY, of course, weighing above the 200-day moving average, a very correlated chart to Bitcoin dominance. So we can only assume Bitcoin dominance for sure is going to be moving up. When it comes to the price of Bitcoin and the price of altcoins, that is certainly going to be a more unknown factor. And being on the Snipers channel, we have the best technical analysis and the best Discord community. Like I said, we have the number one cryptocurrency trade signals in this market, and then our community is just on fire. Adonis actually putting up this target of 115,000 US dollars for Bitcoin. I think that all of this is certainly possible with Bitcoin above 58,353. Realize that we came to this level on a Friday. It wasn't a weekend, so this is real price action. And another interesting fact is, if we look at the S&P 500 on April 14th, when Bitcoin topped out, the S&P 500 actually has seen further highs since April 14th when Bitcoin topped out. So if we were to actually just go back here to April 14th, the S&P 500 was right around that 4180 on the E-mini futures contract. And right now we're sitting at 4462. So does that assume that Bitcoin also has the chance to continue to see further highs? Because we've been correlating the S&P 500 with Bitcoin for quite some time. And I saw somebody in the chat say that, well, if Bitcoin topped out on April 14th, but the S&P 500 didn't, does that mean that Bitcoin still has fuel left in this cycle? I think that that's certainly a puzzle piece on the table to justify the fact that the S&P 500 now is back above the 20-week moving average with a bullish weekly candle. And that tells us that the environment outside of Bitcoin is starting to look good for Bitcoin to see further highs. Even Japan, the largest international traditional market, above the 20-week moving average. These are all factors that we want to consider, because it looks like Bitcoin wants to re-enter price discovery at some point or another. And it's going to happen very soon. Does it mean it's going to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours? I don't know. Once again, the psychology of the market tells us that this is an opportunity for people to sell their Bitcoin that purchased around the $10,000 level in October of 2020 and only trigger long-term capital gains now for the first time at the $60,000 level. So I think that that could certainly be on the table for some investors. And realize that with this gold to Bitcoin chart, we predicted the top on April 14th when we were forming this wedge pattern and about to get above this 20-week moving average. That ended up being the top here. Even on the daily chart, this was actually how we predicted it. We saw how close the 50-day moving average was to this pattern that was consolidating, and that ended up being the top on April 14th. But because Bitcoin against gold is now continuing the trend down, that also can make us assume that Bitcoin wants to re-enter price discovery. So there's a lot of factors now on the charts that is assuming Bitcoin is potentially entering into a new phase of price discovery. And that could be why Bitcoin dominance is moving up. The one odd thing about all of this is the fact that the DXY moving up and showing strength in the past, like in 2018, was a factor of the market that ended up bringing the total cryptocurrency market down. But could there be a potential decoupling effect happening because Bitcoin is being more legitimized as an asset with an ETF about to launch? I think that that fundamental factor can certainly outweigh the technicals from the past. And so with that opinion in mind, let's look at some of this intraday aspects to talk about if we are gonna really see this breakout to new all-time highs in the next 24 to 48 hours, or if there's certainly gonna be some short-term downside before we break into price discovery. But I think it's quite clear that Bitcoin is showing strength right now. Until that changes, we have to assume that it wants to get into price discovery. Now, if we were to look at just the daily time frame, so far, the candle body has only stayed within the previous candle body from the 15th of October, which means we haven't really seen much price action to justify a trend continuing further just yet. And if we look at the 6-hour chart, we do have some red candles coming in, but we have yet to really see a lot of sell volume And we've also yet to really see a lot of buy volume. We actually still have descending buy volume here. We don't necessarily have, ascending sell pressure either, though we have descending sell pressure. And so that tells me that volume is certainly starting to wane off. That could certainly change on October 18th when the ETF is launched. But once again, a lot of people like to buy the hype, sell the news. And so we go into the 3-hour time frame and we look at the current candle. We do have this sort of bearish wick. It looks like we've not necessarily rejected 61,844, but we're having a cup of coffee at this level, which tells me it's not the final destination. We go into the hourly chart. This is where we can start getting a little bit more of an idea of a confirmation of a important resistance or support level being conquered. And we like to find full hourly candles, body and wicks above the level to assume that confirmation. We have yet to see full hourly body wicks above this level. We pretty much got one candle here on the 16th of October with a candle low of 61,856. So that we could assume is a full hourly candle above this level. And that tells me that Bitcoin is not rejecting the level, but it's having a cup of coffee here. And so with this in mind, does that make us assume that we're just going to go ahead right now and start to see price discovery? I think that another hourly candle above 61,844 could strengthen that thesis. And then of course, a full 4-hour candle is really what we want to see. We've only seen wicks above 61,844 so far, but with 1, 2, 3 wicks above this level, we could assume once again that that is showing strength, and Bitcoin having a cup of coffee at this level typically will indicate it's not the final destination. And so I think that what's extremely important to watch in terms of ranges at this point is 58,353 is a major support level. As long as we stay above that, the likelihood of Bitcoin breaking into the new all-time highs above 64,855 become highly likely. 61,844 is the resistance that we're facing right now. If we can start getting 4-hour candles above this level, we have the market structural resistance now that we could assume is going to break if we start getting those 4-hour candles above 61,844. So we're in a very tight range in terms of percentage. We are only talking about a 6% range. And so as you guys know, for those in the Discord, you're going to get the long trade and the short trade when they come. We have the best signals in this market, and we have the best community in this market, one of the largest cryptocurrency Discord groups. I love seeing the participation once again and the charts being posted in real time on the chat. Link is in the description below for those not in the Discord. And so with that being clear, the range at 61,844 is the resistance and 58,353 as the major support. Let's look at how altcoins are reacting. Is Ethereum also going to be ready to break out? Because a lot of altcoins have shown a lot of weakness. Well, we rejected 39.59, but we saw sort of a decoupling effect with this move to the upside when Bitcoin didn't actually move to the upside. And there was a reason we didn't take a short on Ethereum, but we did take one on Bitcoin. And now with Ethereum back below this market structural resistance level, we have to be a little bit cautious with Ethereum because against Bitcoin, it is still showing weakness. And if Bitcoin is truly going to enter price discovery, the total market cap is going to continue further. I think that we have to be more patient with altcoins to follow a little bit later versus just assuming they're going to follow immediately. And so with this Ethereum to Bitcoin chart showing weakness so far, that is still the valid thesis that altcoins are just not going to be performing as strong as Bitcoin right now. And it makes sense that that's the case because whether or not Bitcoin breaks into price discovery and then moves the rest of the altcoin market up with it later, or if Bitcoin sees some downside, the institutions hedging into Bitcoin is the right decision because if there's downside, they see less downside in their portfolio. And if there's upside, they still can take advantage of the upside because if we're assuming that altcoins are going to be moving up, we're assuming that Bitcoin will also move up, being the fact that it controls the majority of this market. So I think that it's quite clear that being in Bitcoin right now is the solid decision. Is it now the time to start moving altcoins into Bitcoin? I don't know. I think that that has already kind of passed. We said that that time was on September 6th when we started to assume that altcoin season was in its final stages, and we were very clear on this channel that it was time to hedge altcoins into Bitcoin, and that of course became true, and we were one of the only channels predicting this double bottom for Bitcoin dominance all the way in August, and then we confirmed that opinion in September when we saw that 19% move to the downside with Bitcoin at 53,000, because when you see those volatile moves, it typically means something is happening within the revolving parts. And so this ended up being the best time to move those altcoins into Bitcoin. Would I say that that time is now? I don't know, with the altcoins already shedding away so much value against Bitcoin. I think it's time to really be patient in the market. You know what they say? They've done a study on portfolios for investors. I think they took like almost 100,000 portfolios, and they saw what traits that the best performing portfolios have. And it was interesting. I think this was in the book Intelligent Investor. The number one performing portfolios were those of deceased people because they didn't touch their portfolio. So I think that that's an interesting thing to consider when it comes to the macro, but things are looking very good. I think the revolving parts are now back in the favor of Bitcoin. As long as the DXY doesn't continue to move up with strength, it almost seems like it doesn't matter. It almost seems like there's a decoupling effect happening right now. But I think that one of the biggest things to consider is what I mentioned from the start of this video. If we look at the timeline and we go 360 days back and we look at where Bitcoin's price was around this time, we are talking 10,000 US dollars. And for those that had Bitcoin positions at this level, of course, I certainly had a lot of Bitcoin positions entered at this level. We've been making videos on Bitcoin for every single day in the past 4 years. So you're damn right, we've had positions at these levels. This is really the first time that they've been able to reap the full advantage of the higher price levels at 60,000 right now, with the opportunity to sell and only triggering long-term capital gains versus short-term capital gains, which they would have triggered back in April. And so I think that that's something that maybe not many analysts have brought to the table, just to understand the psychology of Bitcoin at these high price levels. So that doesn't mean it's not going to re-enter price discovery. I'm just saying that it's never a bad thing to play the long and the short side. Just remember, when you're playing the short side, there's unlimited downside because price can go as high up as it wants, while when you're playing the long side, it's a lot less risky because there's only 100% downside because the asset can only go down 100%. So you want to be in and out of those short positions. And for those in our Discord, you'll be getting the signals as we have the #1 Discord trading group in the world. And with that being said, thank you all for tuning into the Snipers channel today. It's going to be interesting to see how Sunday plays out. It's the most manipulated on the weekend, so this market can really do anything. I think that we can expect a lot of volatility heading into this ETF launch on the 18th of October. It seems like Bloomberg and other analysts are very confident with that prediction. And with that being said, thank you all for tuning into the Snipers channel today. Until next time, Snipers